guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories that you are only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities. Small communities, a lot like yours. I'm Matt Shore, and I was a full-time journalist for almost 10 years before I finally hung up my camera and my notepad. And in that time, I had some really interesting experiences dealing with the public. And I got to know a lot of other reporters who also had some really unique, interesting, and oftentimes funny stories dealing with the public. Before we go any further, I do want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast, supported by wonderful folks just like you. A couple of great ways that you could show us some support would be to, first and foremost, subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever else you might get your podcast. Subscribe, then leave a 5-star rating, and hey, while you're at it, post a really nice review about us. That'd be fantastic. We might even talk about it on the air, or at least share it on social media. Somewhere, we'll make sure you get some recognition for that to let you know we appreciate it. Another great way to show some support is to help spread the word. Get on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you got, Snapchat even, let people know about us. Word of mouth also is just as effective, probably more effective now that I mention it. Tell a friend, tell a loved one, tell some random person on the street that they absolutely have to check out this crazy little podcast and see what it's all about. This episode, we're going to be talking to Kevin Weeks, sports editor for the Messenger newspaper in Union City, Tennessee. Kevin has been covering sports, the vast majority of his life. He got his start when he was a teenager, and he has just never stopped. It's all he's ever done, and he's really, really good at it. But little known fact, Kevin and I actually worked together for a good long while over at the Mayfield Messenger newspaper. We'll talk a little bit about those experiences together, but he's also got some really good personal experiences, some really funny stuff to tell. Some of it is cringeworthy, some of it is chuckleworthy, all of it is definitely listener-worthy. So let's take things over to Kevin right now. All right, I am speaking with Kevin Weeks, the sports editor for the Union City Messenger. There's a little bit of debate over its full name. I'll let him explain some of that. But in the meantime, Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, man. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. Another day, another dollar, as they say.
Well, I wish I got $1 a day. That'd be great. Wow, your business is a lot better than mine.
Oh, man. You're making me sad for the state of the newspaper there in Union City.
I feel like a 9-year-old in a third world country. My goodness.
Oh.
$1 a day. Wow.
And boy, don't I feel like first world problems right now.
You're money bagged, man. Come on.
Not anymore. Not now that I have kids. That's not the case anymore.
I got you. Well, we have one in college, so yeah, I understand.
Well, let's first off clarify the full name of the newspaper where you work.
Well, it is interesting. The flag now, this is the name of it across the top of the front page, is called The Messenger. And they went to that several years ago, and I think the reason they did is because it's bigger. There are fewer letters, so you can make it big, and it stands out. And when the paper went to full color, or color on the front page anyway, which they did about 10 years after color became popular in newspapers. When they did that, they put a colored flag across the top, and they put The Messenger. Now, it used to be the Union City Daily Messenger. It said Union City Daily Messenger across the front, and in fact, the company is called Union City Daily Messenger Incorporated. And the thing about that is, back in the old days, my old days go back to the mid-'80s. That's my old days, when I first started doing this when I was 18. But when it used to say Union City Daily Messenger, our coverage area is Obion County. We're Northwest Tennessee, and so we've got 3 high schools that we cover, 3 communities basically. It's the Obion County Central, it's the Obion County School System, there's the Union City School System, and then South Fulton High School, which is also part of the county school system. But we had those 3 main high schools, and that's what we covered, sports mainly. And so anytime somebody would call and complain from one of the county areas about not having enough coverage and not doing this or doing more for Union City, which that's always when the argument gets started, it always gets back to that. It's always you do more for Union City than anybody. It doesn't matter what you've done. You do more for Union City than anybody else. So if the person was real snarky or real mean about their complaint or real, just kind of a jerk about it, we would say, okay, look at the name of the paper. It's the Union City Daily Messenger. It's not the Obion County Daily Messenger, or it's not the South Fulton Daily Messenger. So I don't get to do that anymore. I have to say, well, yeah, you're right. We'll work a little harder covering out there. Or I have to come up with another smart alecky reaction to it. But I can't use that one anymore. So I'm pretty upset about it. Have been for several years. But it's the messenger on the title, on the front of the page of the flag. It is Union City Daily Messenger Incorporated.
That would be a disappointing thing to lose because when I worked at the Mayfield Messenger, I used that a little bit. I use that excuse sometimes whenever someone from the county would call and complain and say, "Well, hey, look, it's the Mayfield Messenger, guys. Come on."
Yeah, we're located just off downtown. So what's it supposed to be? But Graves County High School is located in Mayfield too, so
Yeah, I mean,
I guess they can complain a little bit about that.
Yeah, they have a good gripe, but it was a handy go-to excuse at times.
Well, I think I used that once or twice up there too, and I got called out on it. So
So you cover obviously in your extensive career covered basically every kind of high school sport at this point and some college sports as well. But we are in the midst of football season, and I figure that football being what it is, I figure there's got to be some great, unique football stories that you've been there to witness or be a part of.
Well, there are. It's always interesting. Every football season's different, and I can remember my very first game. When I started at the Messenger, it was 1986. I had just graduated high school, didn't know what I was going to do or anything like that. Had enrolled at UT Martin as a business major because I thought that's the only major colleges had. I didn't know. 18 years old in 1986, we didn't get out much. So I didn't know anything about that you could actually study to go write sports somewhere or anything like that. Well, I got a call from the sports editor at the Messenger, who was there for years and years and years until just a few years ago, Mike Hutchins, and he asked me if I wanted to string for him for football season. I didn't know what that meant, but he told me it was going out and covering games and basically doing what I had done when I was a statistician for Union City High School my senior year, keeping stats and then writing a story from the stats that I get. Well, I can remember the first game I covered it was like a month before my first college class that I walked into. It was September of '86, and Obion County Central was playing Fulton County, and Obion Central won the ball game 43-6 or something like that. Man, I thought Obion Central was great. They ran the ball well, and I can remember driving back to the office. One of the assistants at the office was actually the son of the boss, David Critchlow Jr., and his dad ran the paper and basically inherited from his father, Ed, years ago. And so I went to the game with him, and he did the photography and was teaching me some of that during the game. And on the way back, we were talking about the game, and I was talking about how great Central played in winning this ball game. They ran the ball well and looked good, and I thought, man, this team's going to be good. And I got back and was talking to the sports editor about it, how great they looked. He was kind of laughing at me. He said, "I'm thinking, why are you laughing?" And he said, "Well, you just wait and see." Well, Central finished 2-8, and coach quit at the end of the year, so I was wrong in my assessment of them. That time. So we've had, it's always interesting how the season goes. We've had coaches who do a lot of yelling. There was a coach still around. He doesn't coach anymore, but he's coached everywhere. Coached at Graves County and as an assistant there, and coached Paducah Tillman, won a state champion, a man named Larry Shanks. Very well-respected guy. You talk about this being PG rated. I cannot quote him directly and stay PG rated, but he has strung together some words as a high school coach and as a college coach. He grabbed his son by the face mask when he was a coach, assistant coach, defensive coordinator at UT Martin, and his son played for him there. He grabs his son after a bad play coming off the field, grabs him by the face mask, and puts together a string of expletives that in no way, in any form of language, even hieroglyphics, even dead language, in no way do these four words go together in that way. And it was just, I'm standing there listening to him. Now, wait a minute. Somewhere, isn't there supposed to be a verb in here somewhere that you're supposed to inject? But it was just, you get those kind of things. Coaches like that. And I've had players cuss the coaches, and coaches obviously will do that to the players and get in their faces and stuff like that. And I've been cussed on the sideline. I've been cussed by fans at Mayfield games just because I was standing in front of them. I was, it's just, there's always a lot of fun language that goes on at a high school football game.
Yeah, sports coaches in particular and fans as well. They can turn swearing into an art form.
Oh, I wish fans wouldn't be allowed at the games. I mean, I really do. I wish they would play all the games with no fans around. It's just the way it gets sometimes. They just play the game, no fans, tear down the bleachers, and all of them. Not just high school, but the major colleges and everything. Just tear down all the stadiums. Just play on dirt somewhere.
That might be problematic.
It probably would be. You wouldn't make as much money, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I can see where you're coming from. I don't follow sports religiously, but there are a handful of teams I like, and the handful of teams that I don't like, I truly hate them, and the whole reason I hate them is because of their fans.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Chicago Cubs fans for me. I've been a St. Louis Cardinal baseball fan and enjoying what might not be a division-winning team right now the way they're playing, but the last two games. But anyway, their fans, the way they treated Bartman, just unbelievably bad. So I have fans like that too, and I have fans. Alabama fans. Growing up as a Tennessee guy, the Alabama fans have always bothered me. I went to a Tennessee Alabama game as a fan, 16 years old, in 1984, and here in Union City there was a man named Colonel Tom. He had been big in the athletic department for years, and he's been a manager on the team back years and years ago when he was the director of the head of the athletic board for years, and was a lawyer in town and had an office above one of the banks here downtown. It was Commerce Union or Rolling Third back then. But anyway, he got his tickets and we had seats, and I had an Alabama fan right behind me. And in '84, this was a game Alabama jumped out ahead of Tennessee, and it was part of Tennessee's 4-game winning streak over Alabama. And this guy was in my ear the whole game. I mean, in my ear the whole game. I couldn't enjoy the game. I had to go back and watch. I had to go back and watch the game on YouTube to see what actually happened because I never got to really see it because the guy's in my ear. Well, Tennessee comes back and wins the game, 2-point conversion late, and I turn around. I've had it. Now I'm 16 years old. I'm a punk nothing at 16. I'm like 6'1", 80 pounds or something. I mean, I'm nothing. This guy's like a man. I mean, he's like man with muscles on top of his muscles, and he's got, of course, his head is all muscle because he's an Alabama fan, so they're all like that. But so he's been on me. He'd been on me this whole game. I turn around, and after Tennessee takes lead, I turn around. I'm going to give it to him. I don't care anymore. Well, he's gone. 40 rows up. I mean, the game's over. So he's out of there. So, and so I yelled at him. And of course, he didn't hear me. I mean, there's 100,000 people in the stadium. He didn't hear some little 80-pound nothing nobody from Union City yelling at him. But those are the fans that gets me. And then there's one. And this, as far as the job goes, when you talk about working and being around fans and this and that, I was working at the Mayfield paper. I was working with you up there. There was a quarterback who played at Graves County, and he had graduated, and he was now this football season. He was at Kentucky. He was at the University of Kentucky going to school, and so his mother comes into the game. We're the following season. The kids now in Kentucky, and the mother is coming to one of the football games that following season. Now back then, Mayfield and Graves played the Alliance Bowl games to start the season, and they played at War Memorial or they would play at Graves or alternate back and forth. And so she's coming to the games, and she comes in, and I come in about the same time, and I walk up to her, and I knew she was an Alabama fan. I knew they were fans of most of the family were Alabama fans. So I'm walking in and I'm talking to her. I'm asking her about her kid and how he's doing in Kentucky. And she's smiling, cutting up with me, and everything else. And I tell her, I said, well, I wish your son was going to school a little bit further south. And she said, yeah, we wish he was going to Alabama as well. I said, no, that's not really what I meant. I wish he was going to Tennessee. I'm a fan of the Vols. Her facial expression completely changed. Her demeanor changed. The face got ice cold. The stare was like right through me. She looked at me and said, I used to like you too. And so I covered the two games, and this was when social media was really starting. Facebook was really starting, and I had started having a Facebook page and was posting high school photos on there because, as you know, back then, 2005, 6, 7, around there, the Messenger did not have a website, did not have a social media presence, so I would post photos there. And so I go back to the office after these two games are over, and I check my Facebook. She's already unfriended me. And so I said, oh, okay, that's fine. But that's my Alabama experience. And being a Tennessee guy, I talk about Alabama all the time.
Well, that's too bad. We just lost the 3 or 4 Alabama listeners that I had. I had a crew.
Well, they probably share a last name, and
let's stop there just in case they do come back.
Yeah, they just remind him that I'm at the Mayfield paper right now, and if they want
There you
to
go.
you can see Eric.
Oh yeah, he and I are on good speaking terms too, so we're messing that up as well.
Well, he and I are
You know what? Eric and I did an interview a while back, and we were talking about sports, and kind of along the same lines. I told him I was always a little bit jealous, even though I wouldn't have had a clue how to do it. I was a little jealous of the sports reporters because even though like I was in the heart of city governance and like big things determining the direction of the city, really a community, a town, a city, they really derive their sense of identity from their sports teams far more than any sort of mayor or city councilman ever could hope to. It's all about those sports teams. So yeah, they'll take the slightest thing really personal.
Oh, they sure will. It's amazing the things that are important to people when they call up, and they'll call up and say, "You put 4 more inches in the paper of Union City's game than you did Holbein County's, Holbein Central's." Okay, good. What am I supposed to do about it now? So it's like something Jeff Bidwell has said before. Really, you woke up being mad about that today? Is that what you really wanted to be mad about?
Right? Yeah.
It's fine. I'm sure sometime down the road we'll do 4 more inches on Holbein County than we do on Union City, and maybe even more on South Fulton one day. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I remember once we got photographs from a band competition. Somebody went to the Mayfield's band competition, took photos, and sent them to us, and we ran them on the inside. We didn't give them top billing or anything, but we ran on the inside because we had it. And they won, so it was fairly newsworthy. But we never got anything from Graves County. Nobody ever sent us anything. And I remember one lady called to complain, and I told her I understood, and I all but told her, if you take a picture, I will print it. I will make sure this goes in the paper if you get it to me. And she wouldn't do it. She just wanted to make sure that I knew she was mad, and that was all she called about.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you what. I can remember at Mayfield one time. First time I'd ever been to a soccer game was one I covered. I'd never did. This was 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And here in Holbein County, we didn't have soccer had not taken over and taken off in high school yet. There was youth leagues and that thing. And in fact, my daughter played AYSO for a couple of years, but it was not in the high school level here. But in Kentucky at the time, it was getting pretty big, and certainly was at Marshall County, and it was getting big at Mayfield and Graves, certainly Graves. So the first time I ever went to a soccer match or soccer game, whatever it's called, football, whatever, played on the pitch or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it was one I covered, and it was at Mayfield High School. And I walk into the gate, and as soon as I get in, mother comes up to me, one of the Mayfield players, and it was girls soccer. It was, and in Kentucky, they're both played in fall. In Tennessee, girls is played in fall, boys is played in the spring, and that's a football thing. To stay away from having soccer and football at the same time. That's kind of why they do it. But anyway, in Kentucky, they're both at the same time. And so I went up to cover Mayfield. It was a doubleheader, and I went up there to cover the Mayfield game. And the Mayfield mother comes up to me. Never been to a soccer. I had never been to one, and never been inside the Mayfield field there or anything. Walks up to me as soon as I get in the gate. She said, "You work the paper, right?" It's like that. I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." My daughter has never had her picture in the paper for soccer, and she's a senior. Well, okay. This is the first time I've ever been to a soccer game. Don't know anything about this. And I'll see what she's never been in. Never been in for soccer. And we kind of went back and forth. Me trying to say, yeah, okay. And her telling me that no, and daughter had never been in. So I finally said, well, what's your daughter's jersey number? And I will do my best before the season's over. I will get her picture in the paper for something in soccer. She will be doing something in soccer in the paper. Well, she gave me the jersey number of the girl and who it was and all this, and I didn't get anything over that night. Still kind of flustered by that, I guess, at the time. And again, it was a mother who, she just wanted to be mad about something and kind of condescending about how she talked about me, and the paper didn't even know who I was. They didn't even know my name. But very unflattering about kind of how she was, talking about the paper and the coverage and this and that. It kind of got on more and more into that. before I promised her, I said, I'll get your daughter a paper. Well, I got my opportunity a few weeks later. Mayfield's playing Graves, and this is everything was factual. Everything I put in the paper was factual. Everything was accurate. But when they played Graves that night, they got beat 9-1, something like that. It was really bad.
Oh.
And I got a picture of the daughter, all right, and it was she's head over heels, and it was a funky looking picture, and she didn't look good in it. And I ran that sucker 4.5 columns by 6 inches deep, and I don't think I've ever heard from the mother again. So I got a picture of the paper. So good for the girl and good for the mother, and I was very, very happy to do that.
And good for you then.
Yeah, I was really proud of myself. It's a great shot. It's one of the best ones I ever took.
Sometimes, yeah, that's how it works out. The best looking shots, the shot looks great, but the people inside of them don't always look that great.
Oh, there are some that even if they do, that people don't like. I had a tennis player at Union City, high school tennis player at Union City years and years ago. She didn't like anything I took of her. Every time I took one and put it in the paper, the next time she saw me, I'm talking about a teenage girl. We're talking about 15, 16 years. She would just one side and down the other about how bad that picture was. Okay, I'm telling you, it's a camera. It's not a magic wand. I can't help you much. So how you look is how you look. I mean, it's the best I can do.
Yeah. Call a makeup team if you're not happy, right?
Sure. We'll post something. I mean, we can do that. Smile all you want to.
One thing that I remember, you and I often, when we did work together, and you're, as far as colleagues go, I worked with you longer than anybody else when I worked for newspapers. But we worked in separate departments, so our paths didn't really cross that much. Mm-hmm. But the one time that it kind of did was when Murray made it past the first round of the NCAA tournament. And I forget how long it had been. It had been like decades. It was a huge deal. And my first memory of that, or my biggest memory, was my father and I actually went and had lunch when that game was going on. We went to Murray, and we ate at a little restaurant there called The Keg. I don't know if you're familiar with that place. Little dive bar and grill place that he and I just fell in love with. And ESPN was airing that game concurrently with another one. And I'm sure for whoever followed that other team, that was vitally important, but nobody in that bar cared. And what I distinctly remember was there would be this amazing back and forth. Like whenever the Murray game was on, there was just electricity and energy going through the whole place. People were on the edge of their seats. They were yelling, they were cheering, and then they would just abruptly switch. There was no announcer came up and said, "Hey, we're about to switch over." It just cut to the other team, and then you just see the energy would just drop. The bar would go instantly silent because nobody cared.
I understand.
And then go back and forth. Then, of course, you can imagine when they won, the place just exploded.
I'm guessing that was when they beat Vanderbilt on the last second shot.
Is that the first time that they did it?
I think so. It had been a while, and I think that's the one. I think it was Denaro Thomas, if I'm not mistaken. I may have the name wrong, but anyway, hit a long 3-pointer at the buzzer, and that's how they beat Vanderbilt. I think that's right.
Okay, if that's the one, then I also remember. Speaking of Facebook, I remember your Facebook post at the time was "Vandy goes down, Murray with the knockout blow."
Yeah, how about that?
That's pretty good. But we
looks to be the headline writer. Well, I won awards for that.
Yeah, but the next day we felt like that was pretty newsworthy for the whole region, so we made a point of including a photo on the front page and a reference into the sports section. That was one of the few times you and I actually coordinated something.
Yeah, the front page and the sports page, they don't go together very often, but they do on occasion when something big like that happens, or when Mayfield wins a state championship, which they do, like a bodily function over there. So
yeah,
which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's good to have bodily functions, but they certainly win a lot of them, and so they get front page, and it's fun to. Those are fun to do. Those are fun to do. I did an 8-page section when Mayfield won their 8. I still have a printout of the front page. It's actually matted and framed on my wall right now. It's a photo that Josh McCoy took. He's down at Ole Miss now, and the ice bucket is being poured on Coach Morris, and the headline is "Dominate" with a dash, DOMIN dash, and then the number 8 because it was their 8 state champion.
Nice.
Yes, I came up with that.
Well done.
I'm so witty. It's amazing. More people don't know that about me.
One kind of regret I have was you and I started working together more and more the last couple of years that we were there, and we were both gone by the time that Mayfield, of course, returned to the state championship, and at the same time Graves County went for the very first time in its history, and I've always looked back on that and just kind of wished, man, it would have been cool if Kevin and I were still there, and maybe he and I could have worked together, because that would have been, to me, that would have been like major front page, above the fold, like top story news. That was huge.
Oh my gosh, it would have been the paper, and then the news would have been like a little 2 pages inside. I mean, that would have been fantastic. I thought that too. I thought how much I would have loved to have been there for that, because Mayfield won, and when they played, it was a beautiful night to play football, and it was great weather. And then by the time the Graves game was, I believe it was the next day, the weather had changed. A big front had moved in. It got cold. It was raining. It poured down rain that whole night. And of course, they lost the game, but it was still, what a great accomplishment to have two. I've never had that. I've never had that in anything. I've never had it in anything I've been covering. I've never had. The closest I've ever gotten was a few years ago. I think it was 2012 or 13. The Obion County Central girls basketball team played for a AA state championship. They got beat, and the Union City girls basketball team made it to the semifinals and got beat the day before. So we had two teams in the state tournament at the same time in girls basketball. But I've never had anything close to two teams playing for a state championship on the same weekend in the same sport. That would have been cool. That would have been fun to do. You and I would have had a good time.
I can just imagine taking whatever front page design we came up with to the back, to the print crew. These guys, of course, are no longer there now. The paper has been bought out and upgraded, but I can just imagine taking back all the color separations to them, and then that guy with that cigarette just take one long drag and just look at it and then just, because he knew how hard it was going to be to line up.
Never wanted to do anything, but didn't want to do that, but always did well. I mean, can you imagine the Mayfield red and the Graves blue, and then there's everything else that was involved in that? That would have been. He would have really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I remember every time I took anything remotely complex back there, he's just, oh, really?
It was like the world was in. It was the wildest thing. It was like, he was that guy. That's what he was. He was that guy.
He was good at his job. He just apparently hated doing it.
Well, that's why I related to him so well. You just described me in one sentence, brother. I'm telling you. When I was younger, like I said, I started this job when I was 18 years old. I started as a stringer back in 1986, just out of high school. Didn't know anything, didn't know what I wanted to do, and I've had to grow thick skin over the years. I was very thin skinned growing up. I grew up in a house that that my parents were great people. They were wonderful. They were loving, but mom was a little sarcastic, and dad could be kind of tough. And so, while my brother handled it very well, very thick skinned, and played football and was a pretty good guy, I kind of demurred. I kind of backed away. So I've had to kind of grow thick skin in this business, and didn't really understand how that what the difference between being picked on, having somebody pick at you, and somebody picking on you. I had to learn the difference. And I can remember doing one story when I first started. One of the things they had me do was the outdoor page. It was once a week. And I was perfect for it because I'm a terrible outdoorsman. I'm a terrible fisherman. I don't know anything about it. I'm probably as un-Southern as it gets when it comes to the outdoor life. And so obviously I was perfectly suited to do the outdoor page. So, which is typical of newspapers. That's what they do. It's why it's one of the reasons why newspapers are what they are, but not really. But anyway, I was sent out for outdoor story. There was an elderly couple out in the county, out around a place called Obion. A lot of people pronounce it Obion, which is incorrect. It's we know you're not from Northwest Tennessee. If you say Obion, Tennessee, it's Obion. And they live kind of out in the woods out there, and a deer had started coming up to their backyard, and they started feeding this little deer. And I'm sure there's a name for little deers. I'm sure there is. I'm sure deers is not correct either. But anyway, that's my outdoors expertise coming out. Well, they sent me out to do this story, and everybody was making fun of the fact that I was going to have to go do this story about this deer being fed by this elderly couple at the end. So I went out, and I was not in a good mood to do it, and I was embarrassed to have to go do it. And it was a great little story. I got a picture of the man feeding the deer. It's the coolest thing in the world, but I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't even byline the story, and still, I mean, 30-something years later, it still may be the best story I've ever read. People at the office would take credit for it when somebody would call and say they loved it. You know, I think somebody up there got a night of enjoyment from somebody who called and liked the story. So, you know, that's one of those things that really that you never know. And then there's one that was really embarrassing, and still is. So there was the guy that I like to call Mr. 1000 Wins. There was a coach it was Hillcrest Elementary School. You know, it had been Troy Elementary for years, and it had consolidated what they had done in the county. And they had an older coach coaching boys basketball out there, and he called the office one day and said, "Hey man, I'm getting close to my 1000th win as a coach. Sure would love to do a story on it." So the sports editor, Mike, he sent me out to do that. But we needed some verification. We needed some proof. So he had to come up with his 1000 wins. He had to come up with all of them. And so he wrote all these results out on notebook paper, handwritten. Well, it turns out he's counting youth league games. He's counting scrimmages. He's counting shirts and skins practices as part of his 1000. And so I have to go do the story on this. And I'm seriously, to this day, I'm surprised that I didn't get fired over that, just because the story was so fake, you know, and so bad, and I had to turn it into something. I must have been really good when I was younger, because I really turned that into something. I still, you know, didn't get fired, but I'm still embarrassed by that one. I did put my name on that one, and I hope nobody ever sees that edition of the newspaper. So that was a great thing. That was a wonderful day. Look through his handwritten notes on notebook paper. Yeah, shirts beat skins 5-4 in the first quarter, and then skins beat shirts 8-3 in the second quarter. So he's now 1-1. We're really 2-0, I guess, as a coach on both sides.
Yeah,
right?
That's a bit of a stretch.
I think stretch is a key word. They're talking about stretch. That's Stretch Armstrong right there. That's big time.
Yeah, I think I've seen more honesty in a pro wrestling article.
Oh, I could write for them after that one. I probably should have applied for some jobs. And I could have written a lot about the angles.
I do remember one time when I was there was a cage fighting league that some of the guys knew me and asked me if I could get it in the sports section. I said, well, I'll ask. And I think the next day I saw you and I said, hey, there's a cage fighting crew that wonders if it could get in the sports section. And you just said, nope. I said, all right, I asked.
Good for you for asking.
I did my part.
Quality work on your part.
Yeah. I didn't have the heart to tell him that there was no chance. But I said, sure, I'll ask.
Yeah, I'll tell him there's no chance. So this was the guy at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll tell him there's no chance.
Yeah, I never saw him again, but if I ever did, I would have been like, hey, I tried, you know.
It's interesting how some of those guys never reappear anywhere. They start something that you never hear from them again. Those are my favorite times, really.
Oh, yeah, those can be the most fun. They're one of them, I remember his nickname was the Grinch. And I remember I asked other people, because they told me about him. I said, why do you call this kid the Grinch? And then he walked out, and I saw him, and I said, okay, I get it. He looks just like the Grinch.
I love him already.
Yeah. I don't think he won ever. The handful of times I went out and saw them, I don't think he ever won.
Great angle, though.
Yeah, great name. I remembered him.
Yeah, he's got it. It's like Andy Kaufman wrestling women. It's a great idea.
Yeah, that one was a good idea. That was a genius one.
Best ever. And I never realized until I watched the movie how good friends him and Jerry Lawler were.
Oh, yeah. And what's funny about that is, have you heard Jerry Lawler talk about making the movie with Jim Carrey?
I've heard bits and pieces of it. Him and Andy Kaufman got along real well. him and Jim Carrey did not, as I understand it.
Yeah, he said that Jim Carrey was such a method actor. He would purposefully not get along with Jerry, and Jerry said at one point he went to the director and he said, "Does this guy know that Andy and I were actually friends?"
I heard the remake of The Slap of the Letterman Show with Jim Carrey in it, but I heard that was real.
Yeah, one other thing he said about that was he said when I hit Andy, I hit him enough to make it count. He said when I hit Jim Carrey, it's like he really went for it. He was so mad at Jim Carrey at that point.
I love that too.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
You know, as far as getting mad about stuff, you know, everything's digital now. Everything is with film, with cameras, film. You know, that's film's digital. You know, everything with cameras is digital. But back when I first started, and I was first learning how to use a camera, I learned how to develop film, and we had to do that at the Metro. We had to develop our own. We had to do everything on our own. We had to roll our own film. We used 400 speed black and white film that we pushed to 1,000 when we were developing, which means we developed it in 3.5 minutes. And you had two chemicals that you did. You did 3.5 in one chemical, and then you did 20 minutes or so in the other to fix it up and clean it up. Well, I was covering the basketball state tournament. This was 1991. So in 91, I guess I was, what was I, 23 maybe? Anyway, it was the state tournament, boys basketball state tournament. Omaha Central was playing AA, and it was a AAA at that time. They were playing, I think they were playing Gallatin in the first round, and it was as the state tournament was set up back then, and they still have basically the same game times. They just switched the order around classification so everybody gets some prime time over the years. But back then it was always single A, double A, and triple A. And triple A would play a game at 8:45. Now this is in Murfreesboro, and it's in the middle of the week, and I'm going to shoot the game. I'm not going to be doing any writing. I'm going to go shoot for maybe a quarter and a half, get back in the car and drive back to Union City, 3-hour drive, and develop the film and have something ready for the next day. And I get back, I shoot 4 rolls. We had 20 frames per roll that we did. So I shot 4 rolls. So obviously 4 times 20 is whatever that is. So I shot these 4 rolls and come back to the mess. You get back around midnight 30, 1 o'clock, somewhere like that, and develop my film. And one of the boss's sons, not the one I spoke of earlier, but one of the boss's sons had messed up in the developer in the dark room and had mixed the developer and mixer together. Well, of course, when you do that, whatever you do with it, if you do filming, it's going to become mush, and that's what it did. I just had 4 rolls of mush.
Oh.
And and it's Omaha Central anyway, and they don't like us anyway at the paper. We're always out to get them anyway. You know, that's the word. And so I knew trouble was coming, and of course I was mad anyway. And I kicked a hole in the wall of the dark room, and we had the next day we had to run a picture of an NCAA tournament game. And what's worse about this Omaha Central game against Gallatin, they fell behind. Omaha Central fell behind 17-0 in the first quarter. And again, I'm shooting, and I shot like 4 rolls of this stuff. And they started coming back a little bit, but by the end of the first quarter, after being down 17-0, it was like 21-4, 23-3, something like that. It was bad. It looked like it was going to get worse. Well, they come back and win. Omaha Central comes back and wins the game, and so we don't have anything the next day. And so it's a Thursday game, so Friday's it. There's no Saturday, there's no Sunday. We got to wait for the next game to get in the film. And I'm just steaming mad about this. And the next day, before I go back to Murfreesboro for the semifinals, which Omaha Central lost to Science Hill something like 100-71. So we had great shots from that game in Monday's paper. Well, we just amazing. How well we shot that game, but we didn't have anything from the win. So, but I asked the guy. I said, "What happened with the chemicals? What went on? And why didn't you change them? Why didn't you let somebody know?" There was no note, nothing. It was just back there. He said, his response was, "Well, I moved the jug over. Didn't you notice?" Yeah, I noticed the jug was moved over. So I developed 4 rolls of mush. I still, to this day, I swear, to this day, I know that was the 4 greatest rolls of film I ever shot in my life. There's no doubt that there was a Pulitzer in there somewhere. They were that good. Nobody will ever know, but I do.
Oh, that's brutal.
It was a tough day, and I was ready for everybody to call and complain. Nobody called. That's what I was stunned about. That nobody called to complain about it. I guess after getting beat by Science Hill, nobody cared. But to have a game like that and not get in the paper like that, we got a nice picture from the Associated Press, Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. That was really good.
Yeah, that's brutal. Yeah, I guess with digital, that's not much of a concern anymore, huh?
I can't use that as an excuse. I have since used developer bad as an excuse, but I can't do that anymore. I can't say bad card.
Yeah.
I guess I'm good.
I guess you could try to say it passed in front of a magnet or something. I don't know.
Yeah, on the way back, I went through an airport.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been really good. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me.
My pleasure.
Strolling down memory lane, there's always some fun stories to tell when it comes to sports and back rooms of the newspapers.
Oh, I was before we came on, I was listening to the podcast you had with Guilty Wilson. I never had anybody show their chest after their brother had painted 101 the Fox across their chest. I never had that happen to me, but I sure wish I had.
Well,
I wouldn't care that it was the brother, quite frankly.
Well, your career is not over yet. There's still hope.
Well, but I'm getting older. I'm ugly anyway, and those things just don't happen to Kevin. They just don't.
Well, if it makes you feel better, it didn't happen to me either.
Well, okay. I do feel better because you're a lot better looking than I am.
Oh, okay. Well, if you say so.
Well, hey, you're welcome. All I can do.
All right. Well, that's an especially high note and a great spot to end this interview, I think. But thanks so much for joining me, man. We'll catch up with you again sometime.
My pleasure. It was fun. I hope it turns out well.
I think it will. And big thanks to Kevin for taking the time to chat with me. That was a really good time. We will definitely have to try to do that again sometime. But in the meantime, if you guys would like to reach out to me, here's some ways that you can do it. First and foremost, this show now has its own Twitter account. So if you want to follow us there, it's at Journalist Tales. Follow us on Twitter and you can find all kinds of updates about upcoming shows and any other news that we've got going on that relate to this show. And if you want to reach out to me directly, obviously you can do that too. I'm also on Twitter at @TheMattShore and on Instagram at The Shore. On top of that, if you'd like to reach out to me by email, you can do that at mattshore@hotmail.com. And I have my own website, mattshore.net, with all kinds of information about me, my books, my podcasts, and probably just about anything else you might be able to think of. This show is also a production of Shore Manor Studios, so if you want to follow us on Facebook, we do have a Facebook page there, facebook.com/Shore Manor. And on top of all of that, we have our own Patreon page now, patreon.com/Shore Manor. Subscribe to us there, and you can get early access to shows just like this, not to mention all kinds of other digital content as it comes available, so please go check that out. We would certainly love to have your support there. And I do believe that brings this show to a close. So once again, thanks for checking this out. Thanks to Kevin for taking the time to chat with me. And to close out, as always, keep reading and thanks.